Hi, my name is Dr. Padilla. I'm a professor in computer science and psychology, and I have been a professor for over 5 years now. Today, I wanted to address a question that I've been getting a great deal, and that is, how much does a GPA and research experience matter when you're applying to graduate school? What type of GPA do you need? What's generally the range? And how do you balance that with research experience? So I'm going to talk about ways to maximize your GPA, the general range that you're going to need, and how to utilize research experience to have a full-bodied package when you're applying to graduate school. So let's jump on in. First, let's talk about why the GPA matters at all. The original idea for a GPA is that it's a way to evaluate a student's performance across different universities. Now, that may or may not be the truth, but it is a quantitative measure of your performance in your undergrad and master's degree to some level if you've done a master's degree. Now, what the GPA is really intended to do is to categorize students based on their performance. So what you really want to do is have a GPA that is in the top level of your particular school. That can be very tricky because different schools vary in terms of how hard their courses are. You might be going to a very challenging undergrad where getting a B in a class is, doing fantastic. And you might be taking more challenging classes as well. So for that reason, the GPA isn't the end all be all. It isn't like we accept only students with this GPA and above, that type of thing. But it is a good signal if someone will be successful in graduate school. And here is why. So what a GPA tells a professor is how successful the student was in navigating the particular program and classes that they decided to take. And a lot of graduate school is jumping through hoops. I am not going to lie. To be successful in graduate school, you have to learn how to meet milestones, meet the objectives of the class, meet the objectives of a lot of different things. And someone who has a very high GPA has learned that skill. They learned to pick certain classes, they've learned how to navigate the systems they were in, and that alone is a very good indicator if people will be successful in graduate school. The other important, just direct information that it gives you is someone's performance in a particular subset of classes. Oftentimes you're going into a PhD that will have very technical demands of you, and the GPA will let professors know if you'll be successful in these very rigorous PhD courses. And so that is to say that it's not just the number, the final number. They look all the way through your transcript and they will focus on courses that are most impactful to the PhD curriculum that you'll be going into. So if you have a GPA that is maybe a little lower because maybe you got a very low score on an interpretive dance class on your resume, they will look through that and they will ensure that you've got high marks in the classes that are most relevant to the discipline that you're going into. Now that's if they decided to look deeply into your transcripts at all. You might have such a low GPA that they are not going to look into your application that deeply, and that is unfortunately the truth. So you really want to think about this as there's a range of GPAs that will get you a deeper look in terms of your application. And at that point, they will evaluate more of the aspects of your research and the types of courses that you were taking. So what are the GPA ranges that you should be shooting for? For master's programs, we're looking at usually somewhere between a 3.2 and 3.7. Those have a less rigorous GPA requirement, and that is of course just a range, but I think that's pretty standard. For PhD programs, you're looking at a 3.5 to 4.0. Okay, that will get you in the door for the most part, and that's on average for PhD programs. If you're looking at top programs in your field, Ivy League institutions, you're probably at a 3.7 to 4. And truly it does matter when faculty are looking through these. If you're someone who has a 3.9, a 4.0, you will be one of the first people that they look at their package more deeply. But that's just the first step, okay? That's getting you in the door. The next step is that people look at the package that you have put together. And that is not just your GPA, not just the courses you've taken, but also your research experience. So for research experience, you want to think about it a little bit like building a GPA. You want to kind of pad the research that you do and have it be as high impact as possible. So the things that make research experience high impact is the number of years that you have been engaging in research. And this is the number of the years that you can put on your CV that you've been working in a particular lab or with a particular professor. When you're doing that, you are wanting to gain years, but also relevant experience and maybe some type of technical expertise that can transition to your PhD education. So in terms of thinking about the different levels, like I did with the GPA, I think for a master's degree, it depends on the nature of the master's degree, but I think a little bit of research experience is good. Maybe a semester, maybe a year of research experience. That will likely get you into any of the master's programs that you're interested in. Those tend to be less competitive because they're often self-paid, where you have to pay for the master's education. So it's a little less competitive. When we're talking PhD programs, particularly in STEM, we're looking at a minimum of a semester of research experience, hopefully longer. The people that are most successful have a minimum of a year. So a year to 2.5, sometimes 3 years of research experience. And I know that can be scary because people don't think about research till much later on in their undergraduate degree, and I think that is a massive mistake. So the trick is to start research as early as humanly possible, and that will get you into this upper ranking of qualifications for PhD programs. Ivy League institutions, you're looking at 2 years of research experience to get into these top STEM programs. Now, when you're doing that experience, it's not about just putting down the time. You also want to make it a meaningful experience. And among the things that make it more meaningful is getting things like publications, presentations, any type of co-authorship on any of those publications that result from your experience working in a lab. All of those things will really ramp up your possibility into getting into those top tier PhD programs. As you are building out your research experience, the other thing that it gives you is letters of recommendation. So you are going to need 3 letters of recommendation for your PhD applications. If you work in a single lab the entire time, you're only going to have 1 good letter of recommendation. So I recommend playing around with a few different labs or ensuring that there are 3 professors, ideally tenure track professors, and the more established they are in the field, the more their letter of recommendation will be meaningful. And the more you get to work with them, the more rich that letter of recommendation will be. If you work in a lab and you've never met them before, they will write you a letter of recommendation, but they will ask all of the graduate students and postdocs that you've been working with what it was like to work with them, and they will write their experience based on the feedback they got from those individuals, okay? So that can be good, but it will be stronger if you happen to have more one-on-one time with a particular faculty member. That is very hard to do because there's often these kind of levels of removal that they have because they simply can't invest all of their time in every student that they work with. They just don't have that much time. They also are required to spend their time with their postdocs and their current PhD students. So working with additional people is really challenging for them. The way you do that is that you become the best in the lab. You have the most promising ideas, you're working the hardest, and they will be excited to work with you because you're showing this additional initiative. That's how you make it into the top tier of research experience, is getting a very high quality letter written directly from a PI. You have 2 or more years of experience in that lab, and maybe you're on a publication or 2. Okay, so that's how you're combining your GPA and your research experience. And I'm sure you've noticed both things will take a lot of time. If you're doing really good in your courses, you might not have as much time to do research or vice versa. So the trick is to balance the 2 things, which can be very, very challenging. So my recommendation for you is to, rather than shoot for getting a 4.0, unless you can just do that naturally and it's not hard for you, to shoot for a slightly lower GPA, maybe a 3.8, and have more research experience to balance that out because you want a full package as you are coming in. Another thing you can do for your GPA is truly don't take unnecessary hard courses unless you really want to. Take the courses that will be core for your PhD pursuits. You don't need to take additional extra hard courses that are not in your career path. It can be hard to know what those are initially, but just be careful to not distract your time, your very limited and very important time, with doing things that are hard, that are not going to serve your purposes. And I think the same advice applies for research. Don't spend a ton of time doing research that's really hard and time consuming if it's not in a field that you want to pursue for your PhD. It will be less useful for you. So it will behoove you to find a lab that most closely aligns with what you want to do ultimately for your PhD. Because you can essentially be working in a biomedical research lab, but decide to apply to a PhD in cognitive neuroscience, and that previous time that you spent in that biomedical lab is not going to be hardly useful at all in in terms of your application. So just be careful to really consider your time to be special and sacred, and only spend it on things that will be useful for your PhD goals and experiences. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is what to do when you experience setbacks or hurdles. This happens to so many people where, for whatever reason, there was a really challenging time for them and they got lower grades at that particular time, and maybe their GPA was lower. I totally get it. It happens to everyone. Same with research. Maybe something came up in your life and you weren't able to do research for this period of time, or you have something peculiar going on in terms of research. The place where you address that is in your personal or research statement. It will be called different things at different universities, but in your PhD application, there will be an opportunity for you to submit a statement. And that is when you contextualize all of the hard facts of your application. The hard facts are your GPA, the specific grades you got in your courses, and your research experience. That letter, the statement, is where you can describe how all of these pieces fit together, and you can contextualize any kind of setbacks or negative things, holes or gaps in these experiences. If you have the kind of minimum requirement where they make it to the point that they're reading those statements, then that information can be very useful, and many people take that into account. I think professors are pretty open to a range of experiences as long as you contextualize it for them. If you ignore gaps in your GPA or your research, they just won't know how to take it. So you need to do the work to describe those hurdles that you went through in a professional way. You don't want to trauma dump on anyone, but contextualize the reasons why you had a particular gap, and that will get you closer to getting accepted into a PhD program. I hope this discussion of integrating your GPA and your research experience was helpful. If you thought this content was useful, please consider giving it a like and subscribe for more content on academic success. Take care.